I just want to say a couple things that I know. Back in the old days, 1700s, women were going to have babies. And so Sally Hemings had the choice of living in the house with Thomas or staying out in the slave quarters. And she was Thomas's wife, half-sister, because the concubines were normal. And you may think slavery was terrible, and it was. I mean, it was awful, but there were no schools. There were not public schools at that time. So mainly it was the private, wealthy people that got an education and learned how to read. So if you were a slave, unless they educated you and you were a house
Continue
slave,
on South Crater Road for 1.5 miles.
So unless you were a house slave, you probably weren't going to stand a chance in learning how to read and write, and then you wouldn't be able to own land if you're working in the fields and things like that. And because you're so expensive, slaves were expensive. They were not cheap. They fed you pretty well if they wanted to keep you healthy. I don't believe in this trough feeding. Most time they had a cup and they ate out of that. A lot of the food that, leftovers and things like that, they knew they had to feed their slaves because they wanted to keep them healthy and working. Thomas would, if a slave, like he had one slave, a teenage boy that got unruly and took a hammer and hit another slave in the nail workshop. It's hot there. And they're making nails, these boys. Now, whether that was mental illness going on, I'm not sure, but he did. If a slave would do something like that, he would sell them. That was his choice. He never whipped his slaves. He was way ahead of his time there in discipline. Even today, I see people, like, I'll go in the hood and I'll see people hitting their children and hitting them in the head. And I'm like, that's not good. That's what they used to think. Disciplining is an area that we need to learn more about, especially in the poor neighborhoods, to not ruin their self-esteem, but also teach them how to choose wisely. And then in preschool, we would say, use your words. And so if you get that concept, to not do things that are disruptive in classes, if you can, and instead express yourself with your words, whether you write it in a letter, write it in a diary, hold your hand up and wait your turn, or speak out boldly, as say Patrick Henry did. But using your words is the goal. That's the goal all over the world, instead of going to destruction for World Preschool. Thank you.